Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 7, The Dragon and the Wolf. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Game of Thrones, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to the end of Season 7. If you haven't seen all of Season 7, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, after I was disappointed by the incredibly fast pace of the two previous episodes, I was highly anticipating this episode, and I was hoping beyond hopes that this episode would be the one that redeemed this season. And as I started to watch it, my hopes were lifted because it seemed like that would in fact be the case, as we got a lot of great character scenes and interactions, and it seemed like the show was taking its time to set things up rather than just speeding through it to get to the main thing as it has been doing in the two previous episodes. There were a few things that bugged me, a few things I thought that they were getting wrong, some things that didn't quite add up, but all in all, I was really enjoying this episode. That is, up until the last 10 minutes of the episode. Now, look, I built my whole channel around Game of Thrones. Not just that, but what set me apart from a lot of other YouTubers that cover Game of Thrones is that I tend to look on the show more positively, and I would defend the show while a lot of others would choose to attack it. I mean, also, but I was never a fanboy though, like some of these other channels were, because I'm always critical of the show when you need to be critical of it, but I always championed that the show is its own entity and you shouldn't compare it to the books, and that you need to understand the difference in adapting a different story to different mediums. This is what my channel has always been about. However, another staple of my channel is that I'm honest with my opinions regardless of how unpopular or poorly received this opinion may be. And so, although the temptation is there to simply lie and say I love this episode, or at least some downplay how I really felt about it, as things would probably be better for my channel in the long run if I did that. But I'm not going to do that. I had to stick with my policy of honesty. And honestly, I have to admit that the last 10 minutes of this episode I felt was the worst 10 minutes I've ever seen in any show this year, possibly longer. And to say that I felt that this was jumping the shark is a vast, vast understatement. And the first time in the show's history, I started to doubt whether or not this was a show I wanted to watch, let alone the best show on TV. And I no longer feel hopeful of what will come next, nor am I eagerly awaiting it. But before I get into that, let me start at the beginning with King's Landing. Now, this was a very long sequence, and we had the most main characters we've ever had in one location. Many characters who never interacted before, and many characters reunited who haven't seen each other in a long time. We start with some banter between Bronn and Jaime about the Unsullied and how they have no dicks. And for the first time since episode 3, we see Grey Worm, and he's standing there. I guess he made it back from Castle Rock okay, not sure what he's been up to. Maybe he stopped by the Crossroads Inn on the way over and, was served a pie from Hot Pie. I don't know. Anywho, the Dothraki come riding up and to make a big show of it, although they aren't really equipped to attack a castle. This is something Cersei pointed out to Robert Baratheon in Season 1, so not sure why Jaime and the others seem so scared of them, but whatever. So this will be the only time we see these guys in this episode. So yeah. So we get some interesting interaction as Daenerys and her party, not her, but all of her team, I guess we could say, meet up with Bronn and the Lannister troop to escort them to the dragon pits for the big meeting. We see the Hound meet Brienne again, and she tells him that Arya is safe, and the Hound talked about how he was just trying to protect her. I love this exchange. This does show how much the Hound has changed, that he acknowledges that he cared for Arya But more than that, I love the response Brienne gave to when the Hound asked who was protecting Arya, and she said the only one who needs protecting is those that get in her way. And I do believe the Hound felt proud in that moment, as he said that wouldn't be him. So I actually found this quite a touching moment. I actually really liked it. We also get the heartfelt reunion of Tyrion and Podrick, and it was so good to finally see these two reunited. And I also really enjoyed the interaction between Bronn and Tyrion, how Bronn was talking about being rewarded for bringing Cersei his head, but Tyrion just saw right through that and was like, "It's good to see you." And Bronn was like, "Yeah, you too." These were nice moments. So then we get to the Dragon Pits and we get another reunion with the Hound and the Mountain. Get hype, get hype, get hype! We get the epic Clegane Bowl preview as the Hound promises you know who's coming for you. So Clegane Bowl coming in season 8. Get hype, get hype, get hype for fan service! Okay, so then Cersei is being impatient because Daenerys isn't there, but apparently Daenerys didn't travel with the others because she wanted the chance to make a glorious entrance worthy of a pro wrestler. I mean, I was expecting like a theme song to play as Drogon flew in, something like, thunder, da na 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 na, thunder, and then like some flames could shoot up in the air on both sides of her as she walks off Drogon, and then Missandei could be like, "In this corner, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, Mother of Dragons, the Unburnt, Queen of Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms, Daenerys Targaryen! Yeah! Thunder! Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na!" And then Daenerys could like show off her championship belt to everyone swinging around as she walks up to Dragon and be like, "Who wants a piece of me? Who wants a piece of me?" But seriously, why didn't Missandei do the introduction of Daenerys with her 50,000 titles to Cersei? If there was ever an appropriate time to do so, I think it would be here. In fact, her reception of a sworn enemy who's devoted to destroying her and who's already killed off like most of her allies and whom her hand made clear was scheming to betray her was warmer than her reception of Jon Snow, a potential ally who traveled thousands of miles for the exact purpose of seeking an alliance with her. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, you may argue that she was there to make peace with Cersei and didn't want to antagonize her, but I feel antagonize her is precisely what she should have done. In fact, I was completely thrown off by the fact that Cersei was acting like she had the advantage, and Daenerys was letting her. As the actual situation was that Daenerys had them surrounded, and if Cersei refused her truce, it would mean assured death and defeat. And instead of pushing this advantage, Daenerys was acting like she was at Cersei's mercy. Where really, when Cersei stormed off in a hissy fit, Daenerys should have been like, "Okay, then just fucking attack your city and kill you all then. And then I'll go off and fight the Walkers. Okay, bye." I know. Tyrion doesn't want her to kill innocent people, but there's still a way for Daenerys to attack the Red Keep directly and not killing the civilians. In fact, Drogon could have just swarmed by when Cersei was in that fighting pit acting all arrogant and just roasted her. No one else needed to die, just fucking Cersei. But the reason why she didn't do it is because Jon said she needs to win the hearts and minds. But it seems to me Daenerys is facing a similar situation that Jon Snow faced last year, where Jon's goal was to unite the North against the White Walkers, but he knew he couldn't do that until the Boltons were defeated, so he took the time out, let's just take a time out, to attack Ramsay, retake Winterfell. It's the same situation here. Why make a truce with Cersei? Just kill her and be done with it. I dare say it would take Daenerys a hell of a lot less time and a hell of a lot less losses suffered than it did for Jon to defeat the Boltons. She could do it in a matter of days, or like I said, like just have Drogon go take a couple seconds, and then it's over with. But no, let's make a deal to go and fight the White Walkers. As even Tyrion knew, Cersei could never be trusted, and as we later learn, her whole argument, her whole agreement to the truce is pure bullshit that she never plans on honoring. And what safeguards, I wonder, does Daenerys have in place to make sure that Cersei is going to honor her truce? I dare say none. Just fucking kill her! Any deaths and losses would be perceived by the common folk as acceptable losses, and once the White Walkers start fucking attacking, they'll think they're lucky stars that she just killed Cersei and moved on. So, although there were a lot of individual moments I loved in these scenes, the overall plan here is dumb. I mean, when Euron came in with his huge fleet to show force, Daenerys should have been like, hey, thanks for gathering all your ships in one convenient location so we can have a barbecue. In fact, overall, I've been very disappointed with the lack of showing anything happening in the political landscape of the South after the Loot Train battle. It's been implied several times in this episode that Daenerys holds all of Westeros, with statements like people saying, Cersei will take back her lands from me, or Cersei is saying, oh, I need to take back the lands from Daenerys, which implies that Daenerys already has them. Really? Daenerys has control of the Riverlands, the Stormlands, the Reach, Dorne? When did this happen? And why the fuck didn't I see it, or wasn't even talked about? Overall, I've just been incredibly irritated about the lack of clarity in what's going on in the political landscape of Westeros, considering that up until these past couple of episodes, that has always been what the whole freaking show has been about. And they just yada yada their way through it like it doesn't matter. Okay, so anyway, I actually like the scene with the Hound knocking over the box and the White charging at Cersei and everyone freaking out. I think this was a very effective scene where we saw everyone come to the realization of the real threat. And I love that Jaime was absolutely taking this threat seriously, and I liked how when he asked how many there were, Daenerys answered, hundreds of thousands. You can see Jaime freak the fuck out, which is understandable. It's good. It shows that he's smart. But now, let me put on my cynical hat again. From Cersei and Jaime and Euron's perspective, all they see is one White. And all they have is Daenerys and Jon's word that there are hundreds of thousands more. And for that matter, they're being controlled that they're these White Walkers, because they haven't seen the White Walkers, they just sell this white. So in that case, the revelation we get later on that Cersei is planning on betraying them does make a lot of sense, because although seeing the dead White would freak her out, but still she wouldn't understand the scope of the threat, which is why this whole stupid plan is dumb to begin with, but I'll get to that later. And that's also why I didn't buy Euron's reaction of wanting to run and hide, which seemed really out of character for him. So I had initially dismissed this as bad writing, but then it's revealed later on that this was all a ruse, that Euron was really going to Essos to get the Golden Company. So, okay, that makes sense, but here's where I'm stumped. So Euron and Cersei plotted before the meeting for Euron to freak out and leave and say he's returning to the Islands. But really he's going to Essos to get the Golden Company. So did they know beforehand that there'd be a White there in order for Euron to freak out? Or were they expecting, were they just playing loose? Were they expecting some other reason for Euron to freak out? I mean, I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. But anyway, I did really like Qyburne's reaction to the White, as he was less terrified and more fascinated, which of course is totally in character for him, as he's somewhat an expert on the undead himself. And it was cool seeing him hold up the moving hand, which with such fascination. That being said, it's interesting that the Hound cut the White in half and it kept moving, which is funny considering that in last week's episode all they had to do was cut it with the sword once and they instantly die. Yes, I know, I know what the fanboys are going to say. They were able to kill them so easily because they were using dragon glass. First of all, not all of them were using dragon glass. Many were clearly using just normal swords. The Hound was using Gendry's hammer, and yet these whites would instantly die when there was like hundreds of them, like 6 people attacking them. Secondly, it hasn't been established that dragon glass kills whites in the show, just White Walkers. Now, this may be a case of me confusing the books in the show, which I try never to do, but I could have sworn that the show itself had mentioned before that the only way to kill whites was fire. Where here, Jon clearly demonstrates they can be killed by dragon glass, which I thought had been established can only kill White Walkers, not whites, but whatever. So after the demonstration, Cersei agrees to the truce, but adds a condition that Jon pledge the North to stay out of the fighting in the South once the White Walkers' threat is dealt with. And when Jon refuses, stating that he's already pledged to Daenerys, Cersei throws a hissy fit and leaves. And again, Daenerys should have been like, okay, fine, fuck you then. We'll just kill you and take your city and then deal with the White Walkers, but whatever. I did really like the scene where Bran approached Jaime and was like, did you not see what I just saw? But Jaime was pointing out that they'd probably meet in the battlefield next, and Bran's response was to say, fuck loyalty, which was amazing coming from her. Her whole entire life has been about loyalty and oaths. And I love, she even went as far as to say fuck oaths. And I totally bought this, as she's absolutely right that the threat of the dead outweigh any concerns of houses, oaths, who the hell cares about all that stuff. So that was great. But after that, Cersei storms off like a 6-year-old. Daenerys and Tyrion scold Jon for doing what they've been pressuring him to do for months. And then Daenerys tells Jon that she doesn't want her dragon to have died for nothing. Well, I hate to break this to you, Daenerys, but your dragon has already died for nothing because the whole plan was stupid to begin with. As we see proven when Cersei decides to lie, backstab, and take advantage of him. And of course she did! She's fucking Cersei! Even Tyrion said that she'd be working to backstab them, and yet he did absolutely nothing to prepare for this eventuality. I mean, what assurances and backups do they have to ensure that Cersei keeps her word even if she agrees? None! None! None whatsoever! Tyrion's plan have sucked all season, and this last one was probably the worst yet. So Cersei sees the white. So what? But then we get more like clunky romance set up with Jon and Daenerys, where Daenerys reveals that she can't give birth, but Jon's like, are you sure? It doesn't sound like that a witch is a reliable source of information. To me, this is very obviously setting up for Jon to get Daenerys pregnant, but what's also interesting is Daenerys says that she's the last Targaryen, and when she dies, her family line dies, but then, of course, we learn by the end of the episode, of course, we already knew this from last year's episode, that this isn't true. So even if she doesn't have a child, Jon can still carry on the Targaryen line. So anyway, Tyrion goes to Cersei alone to try to convince her to take the deal. And this was an amazingly acted scene where Peter Dinklage and Lena Headey prove once again how amazing they are at acting. And this is the first time we see these two characters together in a long time. So there's a lot of baggage there. So it's great to get this confrontation. But Tyrion's whole stated purpose in going there was to convince her to take the truth. And yet, they don't really talk about that. And they just talk about all the personal baggage instead. And at the end of it, Cersei comes out and doesn't just agree to the truce, but even goes as far as to offer troops and support. Now, we later learned this was a scheme, which makes perfect sense. But my question is, why would Tyrion even believe that she changed her mind? I mean, really, he said nothing to her that would make her change her mind. I mean, the scene ends with Tyrion saying, you're pregnant, But that wouldn't change her mind because she already knows this. So when I first saw this scene, this made absolutely no sense to me that she would change her mind. In retrospect, you could say it did make sense because she was just playing him. But then it doesn't make sense why Tyrion actually believed her. I mean, she did a pretty fucking horrible job convincing him that she was on board. If that was her plan, she sucked at it. And Tyrion knew that she can't be trusted and would be looking to deceive them. So why did he believe her? Okay, but whatever. Cersei comes out and is like, I won't stand my troops down. I'll send them north to help you. I'll give you everything you want. Here you go. I am doing everything out of character. Nobody is suspicious of this at all. Anyway, and they all rejoice, pat themselves on the back and congratulate. Oh, well done, well done. When they have absolutely no reason to trust her, no safeguards in place to ensure that she keeps her word. You know, I'm saying Tyrion, not just Tyrion, but Daenerys, Jon, all of them, they're dumbasses. They're thundering dumbasses. I know a lot of people picked up on that line from The Defenders, which came out last week, where Stick calls the Iron Fist a thundering dumbass, and everyone who hates the Iron Fist were like, ooh, sick burn. But the Iron Fist has nothing on these guys. These guys are gigantic dumbasses. I mean, just kill Cersei! Someone made the point earlier that this is like a James Bond film where the villain like ties him up and has some elaborate contraption to slowly kill him, and then he just conveniently goes away to do bad guy things to leave James Bond to escape. And there was this line from Austin Powers making fun of this trope with Dr. Evil's son, where he's just saying, just shoot him, just give me the gun and I'll shoot him. It's the same thing here. There should be a character who they're being like, just give me the gun, give me the dragon and I'll burn her. And don't give me this, oh, there's not enough time. Make the fucking time! I mean, they made the time to go on this idiotic mission to capture a White. They could have used the time instead to fly in with their dragons, go up to Cersei, and done. Done. You don't have to kill, millions of people in King's Landing. You don't have to have one of your dragons die. You don't have to do this dangerous mission that gets people killed. You don't have to give Cersei the freaking chance to betray you, which of course she's going to do. If Jon can take the time out to kill Ramsay, Daenerys can take the freaking time out to kill Cersei. But put a pin on this for a moment because I'll get back to this point later on. So let me get to the scene where Jaime is preparing the Lannister forces to go north to fight the White Walkers. Now, I know the argument is going to be made that Cersei didn't trust Jaime because he met with Tyrion and so kept him in the dark on what she was really planning. Leaving aside for the moment that her whole "you betrayed me" thing makes no sense because he had no idea he was meeting with Tyrion, and she knows this because this could actually be explained away by the fact that Cersei is crazy and she can't see reason, which is clearly the case. But the thing is, I don't buy that Cersei would keep him in the dark this long to the point where he's actually making preparations to go north. He is, after all, still the commander of the Lannister forces. And speaking of that, since he is the commander of the Lannister forces, when he goes north, he should have taken a lot of generals with him, along with their troops. Maybe not all of them, don't get me wrong. There's sure there'll be some who still want to be loyal to the Queen, but there will surely be some generals who would be more loyal to Jaime than Cersei, especially considering that she has no real claim to the throne and that Jaime is the lawful Lannister heir. I don't believe that he would go there completely alone. I guess it's possible that he'll be meeting up with more Lannister forces on his way north, but I somehow doubt it. Anyway, getting back to the scene itself, I actually really enjoyed the scene and would say this was the best acted scene of the episode. It's one of my favorite scenes of the entire season, maybe the entire show. It was amazing seeing Jaime finally realize just how insane Cersei is, and I totally bought it. I thought the build-up And the payoff of the scene was amazing. It was great when the mountain blocked his way and Cersei implied that she'd kill him rather than let him leave, but Jaime called her bluff. And although Cersei was acting like she didn't care, you could see the pain look on her face when Jaime did walk away. It was so beautifully acted. It was just amazing. One slight nitpick, though, I had about this scene was when Cersei brought up the Golden Company. Jaime's like, oh, they're in Essos. What good will they do there? Yeah, because the Golden Company couldn't possibly get access to boats on their own, or couldn't possibly actually come to Westeros. Why? Reasons. This to me just seemed like clunky, contrived dialogue in order to set up that Euron is on his way to pick him up. But again, what does she plan to do with them? Take Westeros back from Daenerys. And I'm still scratching my head when Daenerys took it in the first place. Anyway, I did love how Jaime was being reasonable when saying her proposal is a lose-lose scenario. Has no matter who wins in the north, the winner is going to march south to kill them, which is a great point. However, Cersei's rebuttal is Daenerys' forces would be weakened by the war and so would be less of a threat than they are now, which is fine. That's a good point. But what about if the dead win? She has no contingency plan, no excuses for that. They're all simply fucked. And Jaime should have drove home the point that it was more important to ensure that the dead wouldn't win. So by doing nothing, and if the dead win, then they're causing their own deaths. But of course, this is how Cersei would react, because she's insane. She's arrogant and doesn't care about anyone but herself, which is why Daenerys should have simply killed her. So when Daenerys talks about her dragon dying for nothing, it's, it did because Cersei is just going to betray them anyway. So it did die for nothing because they're all thundering dumbasses, but I'll get to that point more later. Okay, so we move over to Dragonstone, where they're preparing to go north, and Jorah suggests that she just fly there, but Jon insists they go there together to show united front, which I think is just more foreshadowing that they're going to pork, but whatever. But anyway, I didn't really get why, Jorah wanted her to fly there on her own. It seemed like that would actually freak the Northerners out more if she just showed up on her dragon. That would make her look like a conqueror, where if she showed up with Jon Snow, it would make a lot more sense. This is an ally, we're working together. So I actually totally agree with Jon here. But anywho, we get these scenes with Theon. First, he's talking to Jon, and he talks about how he wishes he could be good like him, and Jon, for some reason, forgives Theon. Okay, seems kind of sudden to me, but whatever. And this conversation has nothing to do with Yara, but it ends with Theon coming to the realization that he needs to rescue Yara. Again, okay, whatever. However, I did like the next scene where Theon confronts the Ironborn, and it's almost like Fight Club, where the guy who kicks his ass Theon starts spitting blood all over him and freaking out. That was kind of cool. I'm glad Theon mentioned that Yara tried to save him from Ramsay and now he needs to return the favor. That was nice. So this scene was fine. It was fine. So, okay, let's move to Winterfell. And I am just going to cut straight to the chase here. It appears that I was wrong, that Arya and Sansa were in fact putting on an act for Littlefinger. Or at least that's how it appears to me. I'm still a bit fuzzy on this because they weren't very clear on this. I suppose it could be that Arya and Sansa's conflict was real, but between last episode and this one, Sansa learned from Bran what Littlefinger's up to, and then, told Arya about it, so they forgave each other and conspired to take down Littlefinger. Either that or the whole conflict was an act from the beginning, and so Arya, Sansa, and Bran met earlier to plan this whole charade. Either way, a lot of what happened in the storyline occurs off-screen. And I think that's a huge blunder. It never works when all the main beats occur off-screen, and that is part of the reason why it's unclear what happened. I think the theory is they were all in it together all along, and their whole conflict was an act to be the way, to fool Littlefinger. And I'll say it again. I was wrong because last week I talked about how I seriously doubt that this would be the case. But I didn't say it was impossible. I just said that if they did do it, I wouldn't like it. Because here's the thing. Sansa and Arya's first argument took place in public, so anyone could overhear, fine. Their second conversation took place in Arya's room with no one else there. If I recall, the door was open, so maybe someone could possibly have heard them. But that was pretty heavy fucking acting just on the pale hope that someone would overhear them through an open door. I mean, Sansa had tears in her fucking eyes, and I guess I could buy Arya would be that good of an actor. As a faceless man, you have to be a really good actor because you pretend to be other people. You put it on their face. But Sansa, I know she had a lot of political experience of putting on a facade, but that's not the same thing, especially for the Oscar-worthy performance she put up here, on the off chance that someone was hearing this through an open door and that they would tell Littlefinger about it. On the other hand, if you believe it wasn't an act, then in between this episode and last, Arya went from acting like a psychopath to "I want to carve up your face" to smiling and conspiring with Sansa and being all buddy-buddy. And by the end of the episode, the two are all chummy with each other. So either way, it was extremely poorly executed and doesn't make any sense. And again, the main reason for this was because most of what happens in this storyline occurs off screen. And this was done in an attempt to make this shocking pull the wool over your eyes for the audience. Now, I may have been wrong about the Stark sisters putting on an act and playing Littlefinger, but I completely stand by my statements that Game of Thrones has never been a show worried about pulling M. Night Shyamalan type twists, and they tend to be more straightforward, which is why I found this storyline so out of character for the show and a huge downgrade in quality. That being said, there were elements I liked because I had made the prediction 3 years ago that Littlefinger would be killed by Sansa. Not directly, but Sansa would set things in motion that would lead to his death. So it was cool to see that play out. It was cool that Littlefinger gets his comeuppance for all this shady shit that he's done throughout the entire series. But it could have been handled much better in this, and it was kind of a shame. And the line Sansa gives about the lone wolf dying but the pack surviving seems like it was much cooler in the trailers. The way it was actually used in this episode was kind of just bland. So now that I talked about this episode up until the final 10 minutes, I'm going to do something unusual for my reviews. I'm going to give my rating out of 10 for the episode up until this point before the final 10 minutes. And my rating for The Dragon and the Wolf before the last 10 minutes of this episode is a 7 out of 10. Very good. I had a lot of complaints, particularly on the big reveal in Winterfell, and some of the character motivations were a bit off. But we did get a great slow-paced character interactions that featured some amazing acting, and most of the complaints I had about Daenerys and the others being dumbasses were more about the previous episodes than this one. So overall, I saw this has a step up from last week's episode, as it has the slow-paced character building, great dialogue and character interactions that I've come to expect from the show, and it didn't seem as rushed and nonsensical, but still, a 7 for a season finale isn't that great, and it would mean that it is, in my opinion, the worst season finale the show has ever done. And it isn't an amazing episode that I was hoping for that would save the season. But remember, I'm only talking about the episode before the last 10 minutes. So now, let me get into these last 10, 12, 13 minutes, however you want to call it. And where I believe they have now damaged the show beyond repair, and I no longer have any hope that Season 8 will be the least bit good. And this show will go the way of Lost and other shows that turn to total shit in its final season. And I don't know how, and they just don't know how to give the show a proper ending. Okay, so these horrible minutes begin with Samwell arriving in Winterfell and meeting with Bran, where he's just like, "Oh, hello, remember me?" And it's Sam, so whatever. So Sam asks how was your time north of the Wall? Did you do any sightseeing? See the sights or whatever. Bran's like, "Oh, well, I became the Three-Eyed Raven." Sam's like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, the Three-Eyed Raven. What does that mean?" So Bran explains that it means that he can see everything that is happening right now and everything that's happened in the past. And that statement is followed by Sam telling Bran something that happened in the past that Bran doesn't know. What? He just said he knew everything. So how come he didn't know about the annulment of the secret marriage? Now, I know some will argue that he has the ability to, see certain things. He has access to it, but he has to choose to see it. And so it doesn't necessarily mean he instantly or automatically knows absolutely everything that's ever happened, which makes sense. But this particular thing that he clearly did not know pertains to a subject that he has particularly interest in. So you think he would have already looked it up in his mind or whatever and learned everything that he needed to know about it. And it's a pretty freaking glaring oversight that he didn't know this. And for that matter, how does Sam know this? Because he actually wasn't paying any attention when Gilly was telling him about this. So, Bran goes back in time so we can see Rhaegar and Lyanna marry. Now, a lot of people have complained that Rhaegar looks too much like Viserys, Daenerys' brother who died in season 1. And at first, I thought it was the same actor. But this is actually in keeping with the books, because in the books, when Daenerys had a vision of Rhaegar, she at first mistakes him for Viserys. So this part of it didn't bother me at all. I had more of an issue with the hastily rushed way this was all thrown together and how this is entirely unnecessary for the show. And it seems actually, in fact, contrary to what the whole show has been about. Because the show has been drilling it in our heads over and over again since day one that the actual line of succession doesn't matter, because that's what got Ned Stark killed, because he thought the line meant something. And others were pointing out that Robert Baratheon had no true claim, he had no line, he just took the crown. And later we see Cersei do the exact same thing. She had absolutely no claim to the throne whatsoever, but she's like, I'm queen now. There we go. And Stannis is defeated because he believes his true claim, and it ultimately ends up meaning nothing. And of course, you got that classic line from Varys in season 2, who says power resides where men believe it resides, that power is a trick. The whole point being that the line of succession means nothing. And this is based on real history, particularly the era of the War of the Roses, where the actual line of succession was tossed aside so casually so many times to almost ultimately be meaningless. And now, all of a sudden, it seems like the show is taking a complete 180 to being another stereotypical fairy tale where you have the handsome king who's always meant to rule and be the hero that saves the day. What the fuck is this shit? It is not Game of Thrones, I'll tell you that much. I mean, the whole thing about Jon's real name being Aegon Targaryen is some of the dumbest bullshit that I've ever seen on a show ever. But in addition to this lovely fairy tale exposition that is so hastily thrown in there, we get the infamous boat sex between Jon Snow and Daenerys, where Bran is explaining that they're actually aunt and nephew. Now, the incest thing doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I think it's a bit ridiculous people complaining about this, because we had Cersei and Jaime for the entire time, and their brother and sister. It's way worse. Plus, incest was a common practice amongst the Targaryens and was actually a thing with royalty in history and in real life history, so I don't really care about that. That's fine. I mean, people are just comparing to modern day sentimentalities, but medieval times where this takes place it's actually quite common. But this whole freaking romance was just out of the blue and so incredibly and ridiculously contrived. I mean, I knew it was coming, and I'm not just talking about because I read the plot leaks, but more of the sledgehammer that Dan and Dave have been hitting me over the head with since the start of the season. But that doesn't mean it's believable for the characters or makes any kind of sense. It was so obvious that they're like, hey, Jon's a fan favorite. Hey, Daenerys is a fan favorite. So let's have them shag. And that's all there is to it. So this, by definition, is contrived fan service, and the whole way it was executed in this episode was done so poorly, and out of nowhere I literally laughed out loud when I was watching it. And it's a really sad state of affairs where Game of Thrones is so bad I'm literally laughing at it. You know, this is something I've never done before. And what's the deal with Tyrion creeping in the hallway while they're fucking? I seriously hope that he's upset over political reasons, not because he's jealous. Because if he's jealous, well, fuck this show. I mean, seriously, fuck it. Okay, but that's nothing, really. Let me get to the granddaddy of all my issues with this episode. This is the moment I would personally describe as the number one worst jumping the shark moment in television history. And that is the Night King bringing down the wall with the dragon wight. I just don't know what to say about this scene. It literally broke me watching this. After this scene, it felt like I lost a good friend. And that friend was a high-quality, well-written, intelligent show called Game of Thrones. And that show has now apparently been replaced by a poorly written, dumb, lowest common denominator, pandering, fan service, fan fiction show in which you have to turn your brain off and then just enjoy the pretty lights. I mean, I wanted to like this scene. It did start out really good with Tormund and Beric, and I think the look on Tormund's face was amazing. I mean, the actor who plays Tormund, I'm not going to butcher his name by trying to pronounce it, but he's an amazing actor. He's been one of the highlights of this season, particularly in bad episodes like last week's and this one. And when all of the White Walkers and Whites came out of the forest and approached the wall, that was ominous. That was really creepy. However, the thing is that some people have been asking about what happened to Beric and Tormund after the wall collapsed, because it wasn't really made clear if they were still, because they were still on top of the wall last time we saw them. However, there's no way that they're dead, especially that they died off screen, because if season 7 has proved anything, is that any main character has plot armor, and the show that in the past has been most famous for the fact that anyone could die at any time, no matter how important they are, has now become like The Walking Dead, where all the main characters are too beloved by fans, so the showrunners are too chicken shit to kill anyone worth a damn. So everyone now has, an indestructible plot armor. Yes, including Beric Dondarrion, a guy who has barely appeared in the show, but hey, he has a flaming sword, and that looks cool. So after that, it turns into a cartoon. It's a cartoon at best, a Michael Bay Transformer movie at worst. It's so dumb, so pandering, so fan-servicey, so nonsensical, it's beyond ridiculous. Look, I've defended the show in the past where others complained it was too fantasy. I've always said that the show has always been fantasy. People shouldn't complain about the fantasy aspects of the show. And I've already seen this straw man argument tossed around that, it's just more of a fantasy show now, Mark. Just accept that it's more fantasy. It's not that it's fantasy. I have no issue with its fantasy. I have an issue with the fact that it's a fucking cartoon! I mean, just look at this shot of the Night King bobbing up and down on the evil dragon. I mean, just look at it. It's ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous. He looks like a fucking cartoon character. An evil, unstoppable, unrealistic cartoon character. Now, in my live reaction video, I asked my viewers to come up with names that I can call him now, because I can't refer to him as the Night King anymore, as he deserves a name that more reflects his cartoon villainy nature. So in my podcast, I refer to him as Mr. Freeze, but I think even that is being a bit too fair, because Mr. Freeze was actually a cool and collected villain, and like the cartoons and the comic books. So he's more realistic than the two-dimensional paper mache that the Night King has become. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance as Mr. Freeze and Batman and Robin could imply, in fact, I wouldn't have been surprised if the Night King said, "Let's kick some ass," before bringing the wall down. But then you'd have to specify Arnie's Mr. Freeze. So that becomes too much of a mouthful. In my video, I also referred to him as Yosemite Sam, as it just has that two-dimensional feel to him. But Yosemite is more hot-headed, and where the Night King is more cool. So maybe that doesn't fit too. Tim Yo in the comment section suggested Squidward tentacles as the resemblances of uncanny, but the character traits don't really match. And Icy Fury suggested he be called the Refrigerator, which is cool. But I think I'm actually going to go with Dr. Colossus. If you think about it, this makes perfect sense, as not only do they look alike, but his character traits describe perfectly what they did to the Night King in this episode. So those not familiar with Dr. Colossus, he was in an episode of The Simpsons, specifically the second part of Who Shot Mr. Burns, a classic episode. He made an appearance, several appearances, but his first appearance was when Smithers made a comment of Mr. Burns turning from a normal villain to a cartoon villain, and all of a sudden Dr. Colossus pops up and says, "Bah! He was a rank amateur compared to Dr. Colossus!" Ha 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 ha! So basically, Dr. Colossus is intended to be the stereotypical cartoon villain. Therefore, I think this makes perfect sense. It would be the perfect name for the Night King now. So because from now on, I am not going to refer to him as the Night King. I am going to call him Dr. Colossus. And the whole white dragon itself looked like something out of a cartoon. You know, fuck fantasy. Who cares? Have as much fantasy in the show as you like. This was childish. I would expect something like this to turn up in like Transformers, but not Game of Thrones. And blue fucking fire. You know, fanboys are already falling over themselves to make up ridiculous excuses. Mark, you don't understand. Blue fire is actually really, really hot, so it makes perfect sense. Please, just fucking don't! This is nothing less than because, it looks cool, and I guarantee you, without a doubt, that is all the thought the writers put into this. No one attached to the show thought beyond, this will look cool! And yes, I've seen a barrage of false dichotomy arguments come out already. Well, would you rather they bring the wall down with the horn because the wall has to come down somehow? Yes, because there are only two options. You can either have the Night King riding a dragon, white, spitting blue fire, or you can have a horn. That's it. That's the only two choices. Pick. Why these are the only two choices? Well, I couldn't really tell you, but according to these comments, they are, so this must be the case. So anyway, let me get back to my main point. That is, all of these quote-unquote heroes are thundering dumbasses. Tyrion, Jon, Daenerys, Arya, Bran, Brienne, Tormund, Jorah, all of them morons. They're idiots. They're pure idiots. They all deserve to die. In fact, I hope that the Night King kills them all. I hope Cersei comes in and conquers the South and then is killed by the Night King as well, because she's a thundering dumbass too. They're all idiots! Idiots, I say! Now, if you don't know why I'm saying this, let me make this clear. If Jon sat at home just knitting sweaters by the fire, the Night King would still be behind the wall. If when Tyrion said, "Daenerys, don't attack King's Landing," she went, fuck you, Tyrion, and went and stormed King's Landing, lit it on fire and killed Cersei, the Night King would still be behind the wall. In fact, if Daenerys stayed at home and they closed, then the Night King would still be behind the wall. The only reason the Night King got beyond the wall is because he got a dragon. The only reason he got a dragon is because Daenerys rode her dragons beyond the wall to save Jon, Jorah, and the others. The only reason Jon, Jorah, and the others needed saving was because they went on a mission to retrieve a white. And the only reason they went on a mission to retrieve a white is so they can convince Cersei that the White Walker threat was real. And the only reason they needed to convince Cersei that the White Walker threat was real is because they didn't just fucking kill her in the goddamn first place! Not to mention, actually getting the White and showing it to Cersei accomplished precisely dick! Nothing! It accomplished nothing! Except for giving the Night King a fucking dragon so he can take down the goddamn wall! So, they're all idiots, they're all morons, and they all deserve to die. I did a video before saying, a video that was called "It's All Stannis' Fault," where I was saying he was responsible for the War of the Five Kings. So now, let me do a quick run through at who's at fault for the White Walkers invading Westeros. And I'll start with who bears the most blame and go down the line in the scale. So let me start with who is to blame the most, and that's Bran. Mr. Oh, I see everything everywhere. Didn't see that the fucking Night King was coming to burn down the wall with a dragon white. He didn't really see fit to warn anyone that this was coming. Now, don't give me this crap that Bran doesn't actually see everything, he has to access it. His whole point is to fight against the Night King, so you think that's something he'd be paying some attention to. But more than that, if you can see everything in the past, Bran would have been able to see the Night King training in the White Walker Olympics and preparing to kill a dragon. I'm sorry, Three-Eyed Raven, or no, but your powers fucking suck. If you could see the Night King, what the Night King was up to, I mean, he could really see the past. He could see everything. He would be able to know at least what they were up to. Overall, Bran's powers are bloody useless. And the one thing he stated his whole purpose for was defeating the White Walkers. But no! Instead of using them to defeat the White Walkers and actually telling Jon or Sansa anything useful, he creeps out at his sister by talking about the night that she was raped, and then he conspires with his sisters to kill Littlefinger. Littlefinger. Really? That's what you're going to spend your time on? Littlefinger? What about the fucking Night King and his plan to take down the wall? I mean, seriously, Bran, where the hell were you? You really dropped the ball. Okay, so the next blunt, thundering dumbass that is mostly to blame for this clusterfuck is Tyrion. You know, back in season 2, Tyrion was a witty, intelligent guy that you could really get behind as he was trying his best to do right by his family, and he can see through people's bullshit. And he really knew how to kick ass and take names, and he was really good at like playing people, tricking people. But now, this Tyrion that we have now is very, very, very far removed from that Tyrion, because season 7 Tyrion is the biggest fucking moron that has ever walked this earth. season 7 Tyrion makes the Iron Fist look like Albert fucking Einstein in comparison. I mean, really, everything he was telling Daenerys to do, she should have actually done the exact opposite. All of his plans sucked! Not only did he manage to get all of Daenerys' allies killed, but the whole plan to get the White was his plan in the first place. So it's his fault that the wall came down. I mean, you could argue that he told Daenerys not to go beyond the wall with her dragons, but she, wouldn't have been in the position to want to do that if she would have just freaking taken King's Landing to begin with. Okay, so that flows right into Daenerys, because I know, Daenerys is the Mad Queen. Tons of people have been saying this, even though she never actually attacked King's Landing, which she should have. So if she, if she did attack King's Landing, not just the audience, but, characters in the show would be screaming their heads off, Mad Queen, Mad Queen. But fuck them. Seriously, fuck them. At least the White Walkers would still be behind the goddamn wall. And all of Tyrion's concerns about, the people won't follow you, it's just being brutal. Perhaps, maybe. But at least they'd still be fucking alive. Okay, so next moron is Jon Snow. Pardon, excuse me, Aegon VI. Who was a moron because if he just sat by the fire and drank tea the whole time, then the people of Westeros would be in a much, 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 much better position than they are now, because the White Walkers would still be behind the fucking wall. So all of his bluster about, we need to prepare for the White Walkers is exactly what led to the White Walker invasion that he was trying to avoid. So the last responsible party I will mention is Arya, who isn't a moron as such. It's just that she underestimated how moronic everyone around her is. And if she would have just stuck to her kill list instead of letting sentiment get in her way, ironically, she could have saved the world and stopped the White Walker invasion. How, you might ask? Well, by killing Cersei. Because Cersei had no successor, as Jaime pointed out. Therefore, after Arya kills Cersei, Daenerys easily takes Westeros without much opposition, so she is then free to go directly to attack the White Walkers, and with the force of the entire continent, without having to do any stupid missions to capture White that would allow the Night King to get a dragon. So really, everything that happened is all Arya's fault. So, in short, Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Arya, and the rest of them are just a bunch of morons. They're fucking morons who caused the destruction of the world themselves. So I don't give a crap about what happens to them. In fact, I hope that the Night King kills them all, because that's what these idiots deserve. So my rating for the last 10 minutes of The Dragon and the Wolf, just the last 10 minutes, out of 10, is a 1, the worst. And to be clear, this is my lowest rating, as I don't do zeros. If I do, this would surely get 1. This was just poorly written, cartoon-level, fan-pandering nonsense that betrays everything that the show once stood for. It is one of the worst offenses of jumping the shark that I've ever seen on TV, ever! However, my rating for The Dragon and the Wolf as a whole, judging the whole entire episode as 1 out of 10, is a 3 very poor. And for those keeping track, that makes this by far the worst episode in my opinion. As previously, my 2 lowest rated episodes were First of His Name from Season 4 and Kill the Boy from Season 5. Both episodes had a rating of a 5 out of 10. So this makes it the lowest rated episode by far. And it's all thanks to the last 10 minutes, which were the worst 10 minutes I've ever seen on TV because they ruined a great show. I now have no expectations that Season 8 will be good. Not just because of the sloppy, rushed writing has indicated in the previous episodes how rushed and sloppy it's going to be in Season 8, but because the last 10 minutes set the tone for a 2-dimensional cartoon that doesn't care about telling good stories. It doesn't care about character development. It doesn't care about the themes that the show has always been about. All the show cares about now is flashy action sequences and fan service. That's all I expect out of Season 8. So that's it for my review of The Dragon and the Wolf. I will be joining African Tomko over on his channel along with special guest Phil the Issues Guy for a live discussion tomorrow night, as well as I'll be back later in the week for my further analysis video on episode 7. Next week I'll be back with my coverage of season 7 as a whole, which should be a lot of fun. So be sure to check that out, as well as I do many other videos on other shows like Star Trek and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.